The Institute for the Study of Peak States presents the 4th International Psycho-immunology and Psychobiology Research Symposium. In this video, a presenter's roundtable with public questions.
So let me start with some questions. So let me start with you, Wes. So I've got a similar question from a couple of people now. I've got the feeling both of them are considering research. So I think that's why they've got an interest in this question. So you obviously talked about the pain that you experienced when you were doing research at the Institute. So they want to understand a little bit more about what that pain was. Was it physical or emotional? Was it when you were in the regression? Was it present life experience? What kind of pain was it?
I would say that it was emotional and psychic pain. There was a bit of physical pain as well, but that was an outcome of some of the emotional and psychic pain. When that guy with the big smile on his face was directing me to some of the incidents that I dealt with, he would occasionally stimulate me with a comment that put me into a very intense state. And in one of those, I can remember the emotional and psychic pain was so intense that if I had any hair, I would have been tearing it out. I actually left scratches on my scalp just with the intensity of it. It was extreme, but that was the nature of the pain. And I think that I had acquired a toughness to pain of various kinds as a consequence of my life, particularly emotional and psychic pain. So it wasn't overwhelming. I knew I would get through it. The spiritual pain was one particular time when it had to do with the first contraction of labor, which is an extreme emotional event. And in my view, it is one of the most extremely painful moments, emotionally primarily. The physical pain is insignificant by comparison, of any human lifetime, partly because it is very intense, but probably primarily because it is completely unexpected. And it is an absolute betrayal of everything that the fetus has known. Well, for most fetuses, a betrayal of certainly of all of the loving and caring and nurturing aspects of being held in the womb of a mother, because it is suddenly a feeling you are not wanted anymore. And it changes from a welcome place into a contracting prison. And somewhere in there, Grant said to me, "Your spirit will die." And that was probably the most painful moment of my existence. That kind of annihilation was not something that I was prepared for at all. And that put me into the state where I would have been tearing my hair out had I been able to. So that is the nature of the pain. I won't dwell on it too much more. Very little physical pain. Emotional pain and psychic pain is primarily what I would be referring to. I'll just stop there for the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Wes.
I might add, on a lot of these regressions, you do experience physical pain. Now, the tools that we use now don't usually take people to any of that, but back in the early days, I remember when I triggered my the removal of my foreskin. Holy shit, did that hurt? The memory just came in, loud and clear, and I was clutching myself and wandering around for hours going, ow, 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 ow. Yeah. So there's sometimes physical pain.
I think it's very wise of these people to ask the risks that they could be taking on if they want to get involved in research.
Although do notice that Kirsten and I, have very long hairs. Maybe things have gotten a little less painful with, or Grant's whip is smaller. I don't know.
Yeah, that's in the original research days. It's very much more gentle now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Thank you for going before us, Wes.
Yeah.
Okay, Robert Powell's
You're
asking,
welcome.
do we recreate trauma moments, or is it a case of we just re-experience life moments in the same way based on trauma that is activated? So another way of asking the question might be, how much of life is predetermined based on trauma moments?
I would not say that any of life is predetermined based on trauma moments, because the same trauma will be responded to very differently by different individuals. So I don't think it is. I think that there is a level of maturity, a level of toughness, and a set of beliefs that determine our response to trauma. So I wouldn't say that there is a predetermination of a response. We may have chosen, and this is part of my belief system, we may have chosen certain traumas pre-incarnatively, but our response to them is still our own.
Anyone want to add anything to that?
Oh, God.
I was going to say, go for it, Grant.
Well, I think that's the optimistic view of people, especially if, for example, if they had beauty way. But in my experience, most stuff is like a pinball game where you're banging from one trauma to the next, trying to avoid stuff. And so people's lives are pretty limited by their traumas. There are those moments where you transcend your traumas, but I think most people stay in a comfort zone to try and keep that up in abeyance.
Yeah,
Kirsten?
I agree. Yeah.
Well, the question was how much of it actually is a re-experience of pre-existing pre-birth. And
Majority,
I mean,
I guess.
in our work, what we find is that the majority is pre-birth, that you can regress to an earlier moment of experience of that particular trauma that you're experiencing in the here and now. I mean,
And that's basically what we do in wholehearted healing.
I think that if you have say a car accident, something that comes out of the blue, it will be an event that's very traumatic, but there will be aspects of it that you probably can regress to. I mean, that is probably one thing that is triggered right there. I mean, or that settles within you as a trauma, but it has to do with pre-birth events as well. There will be generationals and other biographicals that link that.
So many different factors in there. Yeah, there's generational, and then our individual pre-birth, and then our pre-incarnatively chosen pain, and responses differ. I remember, and Grant, you can comment on this, but I think you said to me one time that not every conception is experienced the way mine was by me. That some people just sail through it, and it's the royal wedding thing from the get-go for them.
Very small number. Mostly it's a shit show.
That's not a surprise to me. Yeah. And then what you do with that, I mean, I'm really fortunate. I wonder sometimes whether the fact that I went back as an adult, healed the trauma of my conception, basically changed my entire life from that point. So it's like the time loop. And I know that's a paradox, but I've had the beauty way as long as I can remember. I didn't know what it was until you told me about it, and I thought everybody had it, and I still couldn't figure out if, why are you reacting the way you are? So it's
So I've got a question kind of following on from that. So do you have a sense of why the trauma at conception is there?
We need to be toughened from a very early stage for what life will be like after birth. And I think that that experience is one of those toughening things that help us to come through birth. And I say that not because I had that understanding at the time, but because when I was experiencing labor as a fetus, I understood that this is necessary, that this will help me to survive. And, there's a story about a guy who, and I don't know if it's an apocryphal story or not, but it's a powerful one. A man who found a butterfly trying to emerge from its chrysalis, and it was really struggling, and he was moved to help it. So he did, and as a consequence of his help, the butterfly didn't have to exercise the muscles that would pump fluid into its wings, and it couldn't fly, so it died. And I think that the same may be true for us to I hope a lesser degree as human beings. But right from the beginning, we experience things that challenge us. And I was going to say most, but not all survive. My understanding from the research I was doing for my book is that less than 30% of conceptions result in the birth of a healthy baby. So a lot of conceptions don't make it. And that's the process of, you could say, weeding out the ones that are not ready for life.
Anyone else?
Well, why is trauma there in conception? I mean, I think our model is predicting it differently than what you're saying, Wes. Essentially, if everything goes well, you become the most amazing that you can, and that's without the trauma. So I'm not sure that the toughening in our perspective is necessary.
But
if you think it's the different approach?
No, I think he's noticing that certain events change us.
Right, they change us to become.
First contraction, you really do change. It changes you fundamentally. And you can either do that, oh, this is fun, or you can go, no. Yeah. Yeah. Conception for sure. You become something new if you do it right. If not, you just kind of stumble on being an egg and sperm in one little cell.
But in a large degree, a lot of it is generational. It's like we do it this way because our mothers and our fathers did it this way, and our grandmothers and grandfathers, and on back through generations and generations. And it was like, oh, this is the way that you be human. And it's pretty messed up.
Yep. There's a slogan in the Institute: choose your grandparents wisely. Do you want to follow up on what you're saying?
Well, I think the question was, why is there trauma? And maybe what you said, Mary, is that most of it is generationally, but it leaves you with biographical traumas behind because of those screw-ups or the bumps on the road. So you can say that they're there because of grandparents and their grandparents also. So why are they there in the first place? Maybe the question instead. I don't know. So
yeah, that part of the mystery is, why do we have these experiences which are felt as trauma when one could say that ideally we should be born without that and be born amazing?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and there's still that idea of a toughening, which doesn't necessarily require the extent of trauma that I experienced.
Yeah.
So the two ideas are not incompatible.
Right.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, especially if you say, well, toughening or changing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question from Michael St. John, and Christian had a similar sort of question as well. Is it within the realm of future possibility to find generational traumas that, when healed, have broad effects across large groups of people in regard to primary cell or perhaps other parasites?
That's a great question.
It's something we actually have been thinking about, whether, at some level, if you go far enough back, we are more and more related or have there are less and less people. So hypothetically, that would make sense.
Yeah, but I mean, I totally agree. Theoretically, right on. Yeah. But experimentally, we have found that it does affect the local family. So in other words, you do a generational, it pops out of, you know, your descendants and all that stuff. What it doesn't do is have the same impact. So even if a trauma is gone, generational in particular, that doesn't mean how you personally responded to it is the same as how somebody else responded to it. So you could both have the problem, but you deal with it differently. Kind of like Wes was saying earlier, how we deal with this stuff varies. But yeah, theoretically, you should be able to go back 10 centuries and get a whole swath of people fixed up. It could be that a lot of these things just keep popping up over and over and over, are very similar. And we're just seeing very similar traumas that coming from different places in time. Too bad. It'd be really fun to just, that was the original actually goal of the Institute, was to go back far enough to fix a few thingies and then have it propagate into the present.
Okay, so Evan's asking, sometimes people have temporary better states when they're physically near, in inverted commas, enlightened people or gurus. How does this work?
I didn't get the full
question. Could you repeat that, please, Shayne?
Yeah, so some people claim when they're in the presence of someone that calls himself a guru or an enlightened person, that the person in their presence temporarily ends up in a peak state. How does that work?
I'll take a stab at it, and then so my sense is what happens, you know, whatever we're calling a guru, but if a person doesn't have a lot of their trauma activated, it can feel really safe to be around them because they're not kind of bouncing and triggering things off of you. It's the same reason when being around certain people, it can make healing easier because there's not this unconscious resistance, because the person, you know, the therapist with a lot of their own trauma in that issue is unconsciously screaming, oh my God, this is horrible, right? And that's one of the things we teach our trauma therapists is if your client's not getting better, the first thing to look at is yourself, right? Am I unconsciously telling them this isn't safe to heal? So if someone is in a very, very good state and they've healed a lot of that, it just feels safe to be there. And I think what happens is a person can relax and, you know, untrigger or deactivate some of their own traumas that are blocking a peak state. And that's why it's temporary. And it's also probably going to depend on how much trauma or how close to that peak state they are as well. That'd be.
My response to that question would be looking into the same room I think that Mary is looking into, but through a different window. And it has to do with the energetic field of the person who is in the higher state and the idea of entrainment. So elevating someone who is just by being in their energy field. And I've had that experience, and I've heard other people talk about it as well. And there are stories of people who, after studying with a high-level guru at one point or another, were actually enlightened, elevated permanently to that other person's state, which is consistent, I think, with both the trauma based view and the energetic view, the entrainment view. Just a different interpretation of the same, possibly the same phenomenon.
Okay, so given all the panelists here are over 50, here's a question that we're all interested in. Are there any advancements in reversing aging? Does it have to do with trauma or parasites, and is it an issue that is research solved or close to being solved?
I think you should talk about that. I mean, it's on the list. I think a high priority here.
High priority, yeah. You see, I have a younger wife, and well, I want to stay young to hang out with her better. We have seen some interesting stuff. Again, it's low priority for us because we're really working on more fundamental issues and more disease applications. But occasionally we'll take a few minutes.
He jokes that it's high priority, but it's really not.
Yeah, well, it's getting there. But occasionally we'll take a few minutes off and go, huh? And one was in New Zealand. Do you want to tell that story?
No, you go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. We were sitting waiting for a ferry, and a guy came over and we chatted for a bit, and he was in his 80s, I don't know, somewhere in there. His skin was perfectly smooth, and I mean, it was like pristine. His skin was far better than my skin. You know, I get wrinkles and all that stuff. We looked at him and we looked at each other and we went, huh, you know. And then our own models start to trigger in our thinking. We thought, well, what the hell? And we took a look inside and we found a particular prion that was living in our skin cells that seemed to be making our skin more resilient, less resilient, I should say. And I had it worse than Kirsten. Maybe it's age related. The older you get, the more it happens. But it's definitely on my to-do list to see what happens if we get rid of this particular pathogen. And if I start looking like Tom Cruise, that'd be cool. Wes is laughing. He thinks hopeless.
I'm thinking there's going to be a whole lot of pathogens in there. I think for me, I know that this is very unscientific, but I think, well, maybe not. Attitude has a lot to do with it. Mm-hmm. I feel younger now than I did 10 years ago, even 15 years ago. And it has to do, I think, with what I believe and the way that I'm being in this world in a physical way, manifesting that energy. So, and the whole field of energy is I think unexplored still. Its potential is not really well understood. And again, you know, a combination of the idea of pathogens and that sort of thing, plus energy, I think they complement each other, and emotion as well.
I actually saw a little news headline saying that there was a new study. I think it was done I think they looked at 4,000 Chinese elder people. And it said, there are two emotions that age you more than smoking. And then I couldn't read more, so I really don't know what those were, but yeah.
I think a lot of aging has, and actually, frankly, a lot of chronic diseases have to do with the phenomenon of inflammation. Basically, our tissues and our organs aren't working well. And we've had little clues here and there, but whether that's, and I think probably not a specific parasite or pathogen, maybe toxin related. We really haven't looked at it at all, but that would be one thing to look at broadly. Is there something about the inflammatory process or the out of control inflammatory process, especially, for example, if we consider autoimmune diseases, where this is like self-directed inflammation towards ourself and breaking down our own, tissues in various parts. So things like rheumatoid arthritis or Hashimoto's thyroiditis, different tissues, but it's autoimmune phenomenon. And we've had a few little data points here and there that that may well be the case, but we haven't looked at it. It's on the list.
I have an interesting data point. My body was basically the body of a young man. And then I was in Hawaii and I breathed volcanic fumes that felt very metallic. And almost immediately, my physical situation got worse. Like I was on aging fast forward. I gained weight, never had weight before. I started to wrinkle, just a lot of different things. And when I went back to that particular event, I could see that I was, as I was breathing in these toxins, I was also breathing in a particular pathogen. And it's high on our list to investigate. For me, it was like suddenly I got male menopause just from breathing this air. And yeah, I think we can track that, see if that's a general problem with aging. When we did look at some of my research colleagues, they had this particular pathogen earlier on in life. They got it, or they actually were born with it. And it seemed to really have an influence on how they aged. I'm not saying it's going to make you young again, but on the other hand, it might make the quality of life go way up to get rid of this pathogen. And whatever following stuff happens, like an avalanche, you get this one, and then you get the next, and then it damages something else, and blah, 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 right? But it's also high on my personal priority list. Our focus is on Beauty Way and making psychoimmunology work. So soon, let's hope I don't die of old age before we get to it.
I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people interested in that research when we get around to it. So Kristen's got another question around what's our perspective on what actually makes people largely distant from each other? So what's at the bottom of what really keeps people in fights and relationship dysfunction?
Well, I think actually that question came up when I was talking about Beauty Way versus normal consciousness. And you can say normal consciousness is intrinsic to having that problem. There are definitely methods you can use in normal consciousness to get more peaceful and getting more feeling connected to in a true and not dysfunctional way. But I think that the way that our biology is set up is that it's intrinsic to the Beauty Way or to optimum relationship, even in deep inner peace, so that you're actually still not changed in consciousness. That can probably also allow you to better connect. So states of compassion and other things that can bring that. But normal consciousness is just has a lot of problems that go against actually being really well on that one.
I'm going to add, for years I've been telling people in the Institute, it's like healing people is like carrying the rocks up the hill, and then it rolls down, then you have to do it again. Sisyphus, I believe, is the Greek. Yeah. Really, I don't want to do individual rocks anymore because it just seems endless. I want to do Beauty Way and then fix whatever's left over. Yeah, so that's where my focus for all these years has been, is trying to figure out how to do Beauty Way.
Definitely the most efficient way to move forward, yeah.
So on that question, Grant, here's a question I'm sure you've been asking yourself for many years. So why is the Beauty Way process so elusive?
Oh, it took forever just to figure out what the hell was going on. I mean, we figured with Wes in early development, we figured out that the key developmental events blocked peak states, right? And then we found, hey, there's maybe up to 100 peak states, optimum functioning of the primary cell and all that. And when we started to get these peak states, we went, how come we're not getting Beauty Way? And what is Beauty Way? And it just took forever to figure out where beauty weight was supposed to come in. One of the reasons I worked with Wes is because he had great states to start with, and we could look at him and versus other people and go, what's the difference? We're just trying to figure out where it was. We really didn't isolate that until the last, I don't know, 2010 or 12. And then we weren't sure whether it was pathogen related until what, 4 or 5 years ago? Something like that.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah. And then once we had that, then we had to have a bloody psycho-immunology technology to be able to do anything about it. So it's been a real slow grind. Just imagine this poor guy, me, pounding his head against the wall until the wall falls down. Essentially, that's what it's felt like.
We've
Did
probably
that
got some.
answer the question?
Yep. Yeah, and there's probably some
Anybody?
follow-up questions around the beauty way as well. What's that?
Well, I think Mary and Kirsten could throw in some stuff too, because we've
been banging on this. I mean, our foreheads are pretty sore too. So because we don't know exactly, or we haven't known exactly where to look, what I was saying around the conception moment of normal consciousness, there's so many pathogens. And because you're kind of stuck in that space of I mean, we're being contaminated ourselves. So actually trying to solve a problem that you intrinsically have and that doesn't want to be solved, you can say, because this is like, get rid of that. Yes, true. There's a pathogen there that needs to go, but it's essentially, unless you get really conscious about it, it is who you are. I mean, it's hard to differentiate what's what. And so getting underneath the trauma that you want to interact to that parasite is the key, but we haven't been able to do that unless we actually can push the problem so far away that trauma gets activated. And that's where the beauty of healing the generational trauma that holds the pathogen, the psycho-immunology pathogen trauma, is beautiful. So.
I like to think of it too. The problem is my precious. From Lord of the Rings, shit, no, I'm not going to get rid of this pathogen. I don't care if it gives me beauty or not. Screw you, get away. We've been doing a ton of work just to get to the points where Kirsten and Mary could actually look at this problem successfully. I'd say thousands of hours.
Yeah, and I mean, part of the problem is that, as Kirsten was saying, this Grant is always saying that, my precious. And until I healed the trauma, I just wanted to punch him in the nose. Because it's like totally unconscious. It's like, I don't want this. Where do I want this? I can't feel that I want it. It's kind of like saying, a fish in the water or breathing air. It's like, this is a toxin. And you're like, no, this is giving me life. It's air. I need this to exist. It's just the reality, and it's so normal that seeing it as any different. And for example, if the air, it's actually toxic to me, but to me it just feels like fresh air that I need to live. You're asking me to get rid of that? Are you insane? At least that's what my unconscious is saying. And at a conscious ability, at a consciousness level, as Kirsten's saying, is getting really conscious to, oh my gosh, I'm breathing in this toxic substance. So that's what it's like. And it's peeling layers and that and this and that. And unfortunately, often Kirsten and I have different, we don't have exactly the same trauma set, which I think makes us a really good team. And and sometimes she's triggered and and I'm helping her out, or I'm triggered, or vice versa. And we just really kind of work as a pretty good team that way. And with Grant going, my precious where is it? I can't find it. So it's been exciting work, but very long. And we'll think, okay, this is the answer. It's like, oh no, it's just another layer.
Yeah, and we couldn't use people like Wes because it went well for Wes. I mean, he had a bunch of traumas, but he still got beauty way. It went well for me, so that didn't help. we didn't know what the difference was, because either everything seemed to work or it didn't work at all and nobody could look because it was too traumatic. And we had these two groups and we just couldn't reconcile them.
Yeah, and another huge, interesting thing is that if you'll notice, Wes and Grant are male and Kirsten and I are female, which, and what happens is that women, we tend to you see, I'm a doctor, so I notice this kind of thing. But the things you learn in medical school, but women tend to associate with their egg, right? And both men and women have both, and men tend to associate with their sperm consciousness. And with the conception issue, it's the egg that is the essential problem that's taking on this parasite, as far as we can tell. And so we're more identified with that half of the problem, which is, if you will, more of a problem because we're, if you more identified with actively pulling it in. But it's also, the brilliance of it is that, at least this is the story I'm telling myself, is that it's allowed us to see problems that Grant couldn't see, because he's like, I'm a sperm, what's the problem? Why are you doing this? And Kirsten and I are living it every day. So yeah.
So Grant, given you said that the focus now is actually come up with a process for getting people into Beauty Way, and then we'll figure out, what's left over. Question that both you and Wes then could answer, given you've experienced Beauty Way for long periods of time, is, so then what issues won't it solve?
I've got some answers, but Wes, I'll give you a chance to think about it.
Sorry, the question is, what issues will having the Beauty Way not solve?
Correct.
Whoa.
So in other words, what issues
let
it
me
doesn't
count the
fix?
ways.
Yeah.
Let me chew on that for a bit. If Grant has something to offer right away, go ahead.
I do. I thought it would be a panacea and fix pretty much everything, because I found a person with Beauty Way who was an alcoholic, and I went, what? Well, later on we found alcoholism is caused by a bacteria. So he had this disease quite strongly, but at the time I went, that doesn't make any sense, because Beauty Way gets rid of trauma. So in the case of alcoholism, though, it turns out that in his case, it wasn't a trauma-related issue. It was a sheer pathogen problem. So if you got pathogens in Beauty Way, it doesn't stop it. And I looked at my relatives who mostly have Beauty Way, and they've got different diseases. The difference is it just doesn't affect them. Yeah, I've got cancer and I'm going to die in 6 weeks, but life is good. Basically, the Beauty Way attitude towards life and just being glad to be alive. The pain and suffering just aren't important. They still have a zest for life, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I think I would echo that. And when you said the pain and suffering, the thing that came immediately to my mind was, I don't know where I heard this, but pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. And for me, when I look at some of the very painful experiences that I've had in my life, and I shift my consciousness into looking at that through the lens of the Beauty Way, it's like, yeah, shit happens. You don't have to eat it. But is that a graphic enough one for you, Mary?
I love it.
Yeah. And so I can look at some of the painful events in my own life, in lives of those who are close to me, and in the human species, and say, this is how it is, and it's okay.
Mm.
Yeah, and I don't have a lot of the stuff that people who carry a lot of trauma do. I have no chronic physical pain in my body at all. And I think some of that is due to really in the last few years, really saying, yeah, I can take this different attitude. And the beauty way is a very empowering thing, or it can be. But there's still a choice for me, maybe not for everyone. There's still a choice for me as do I go into the suffering, or do I just look at the pain? And you know, just being in the beauty way does make life a lot easier, I am told. You know.
Yeah. We were talking about relationships earlier. I remember there was a question. I had a
thinking of your friend.
I had a client couple therapy. And the woman came in and said, I'm bringing my husband in. Here he is. He is just in denial of his emotions. You know, he's just drives me nuts because he's just blocking all of his feelings. And the husband looked at me and said, yeah, I'm here to get help. Please help me. My wife says I have a problem, so help me out. Well, I did a quick diagnosis. The guy had beauty way, right? He had no negative emotions. He literally didn't have any traumas. And this is so out of the ordinary that the woman just assumed that this was dysfunctional, that he was in repression or denial or something like that. And I mean, I don't think she was really happy when I said, this can't be fixed. You know, this is something that you should have, not that he should get rid of. But we don't have a fix for it. But it was really graphic, the difference and the kind of problems that if we have a working beauty way process, couples will experience unless they both do it.
So obviously got quite a bit of interest in beauty way now. So there's a number of questions here. So Evan was saying, Mary said that psychoimmunology healing would be irreversible. So why did Grant lose his beauty way?
Great question.
Yeah.
Oh man, working with Wes, we were thinking trauma is the key, right? But it turned out there was a completely unrelated mechanism for losing states. I had no idea what it was, but we could witness it. You'd have a state and suddenly, boop, gone. Beauty way was one of those, boop, gone things. And so I didn't have any resistance to beauty way, but suddenly it was just gone. And I was in hell like everybody else, but a different hell, because like I said, I didn't have resistance to it. So I didn't have a lot of the issues around resisting beauty way. Yeah, it turned out to be a prion disease issue. And that's one of the things high on our priority list. We have a kind of a makeshift fix for it, but it's again high on the research list. So I couldn't use myself as a guide to the problem, right? Because I had a completely unrelated thing going on. I didn't lose it at conception like so many people do. Or never
Mary did mention that in her talk, the whole prion peak state problem. Yeah. And the one we have to solve that so that we're not giving people a state like beauty way and then like it's like, oh, here's a carrot, eat it. Whoops, nope, it's gone. Yeah. So we really need to solve both of those problems, for which we need the working psychoimmunology.
So Evan, does someone else want to add to that? No?
Good.
So Evan has heard of one of our peak state processes, the life path process. So he's interested to know, do the panelists regularly use life path process to be on track with their goals?
Well, as I didn't mention this one, but as it turns out, the life path is the ability to see life path is you're actually seeing a fungal structure in the immune cell. And so it's one of those ones that we've used. Now, how this works, I do not know. It's like, how the hell does that pathogen get us on our life path? But that sense of being on track. So it's the best we had at the time, but our ultimate goal is getting rid of that pathogen using a psychoimmunology process. And our senses. It's just then you just are on your life path, and it's not this being locked out. I don't know if you'd agree with that, Grant, if that's how it works, but that's my sense of you just don't have that pathogen and not that issue.
Well, I gave the example of following your joy and excitement, which is sort of a indicator for being on track with your overall goal, whether you're, tapping into a fungal structure or not. So that's basically what I think I follow in my own life. As
Yeah. Well, Mary and Kirsten were guinea pigs for getting rid of that particular fungus, and I believe that was the one that suddenly made it so that you could heal trauma just by feeling it rather than having to do anything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was part of that, yeah.
Okay, so Tess has got a question here around, if I heard correctly, Kirsten mentioned that healing trauma doesn't make you altruistic. And it seems that individuals that appear to be in peak states and have done large-scale healing work have also simultaneously been perpetrators of large-scale abuse. Is there research around what moves us towards altruism?
A change in consciousness is probably necessary to really give you that, because the being caught up in looking outward is difficult. You can be a good person for sure, but to have that true, with no wiggling, altruistic path, I think in your experience it really requires
Better
states. Yeah. So no, and correct that trauma healing doesn't change fundamentally who you are. And in essence, if, like you were saying in your example there, that people can be looking like they're in good spaces, but still have really bad attitudes in terms of their actions, and healing in those circumstances can actually make people more able to use whatever their not so good attitude is.
Yeah, makes them stronger to be rotten people. We've seen that definitely over the years. Wes, do you have any comments on that?
I don't know.
No, I'd say trauma healing in general is a good thing, and it improves your everyday life, especially if you have something big that's up for you, or something that has really been a painful thing, like a void in your column could be, or having dysfunctional attractions in terms of neediness. Those things can definitely change how you behave and make better relationships. So I still support the healing work we're doing, and just at the same time say we're really focused on doing the overall beauty way, because that of the situation that we all are stuck without the beauty way.
I do have a comment. Sometimes when a question gets posed, I have to kind of think, okay, this is the water I swim in, so let me try to be more aware of the water. And just thinking about altruism on in my own life, my own existence. When I am well anchored in the beauty way, seeing beauty in everyone and everything, altruism becomes easy, partly because I then begin to identify with all else and know that if I am loving of everything else, it benefits me, both because I am, I get satisfaction simply from doing that, and also because being loving includes myself in that. And so altruism seems to arise naturally from being in the beauty way. So I think that maybe finding the beauty way might be a good step toward having a kind of a resting attitude that includes altruism.
The other comment I would make is that generational trauma is the trauma that feels very personal and that pushes or guides, or we identify with how we act. And the evil, there's a lot of evil in some generational traumas. And that is a big problem, but can be healed with generational healing. But that may, below the surface, at some level, you're getting this information from your ancestors that I won't survive without this evil vibe, and the evil kind of the opposite of altruism, if you will, the wish to do harm at a bigger or lesser degree to others, and it can be generationally driven. So I think that's as particular traumas that can be, if you anti-altruistic and operating in the background, are a big problem.
There's we've been talking about beauty weight because partly that's high on our research priority list, but it turns out that to me it's the entryway into more profound levels of being. So it's almost like the first step. If you have beauty weight, then you can progress. If you don't have beauty weight, it's like all of that stuff is just completely blocked from you just can't make progress. And so when you start looking at that, you could say, yes, there's more profound of connection to the earth. There's more profound connections of to other people, to larger, awareness and stuff like that. But without it, maybe you get a momentary glimpse, but you're kind of screwed. And that's one of the reasons why we were pushing beauty weight so hard. The other reason is because it makes better researchers. That's my Dr. Evil chuckle there. Yeah.
More willing guinea pigs.
Exactly. Although I worry that they'll get so healed that they'll go, this is stupid. I'm getting out of here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of from a martial arts tradition and having a black belt. So in martial arts, there's this, in most of them, there's this level of belts you go through. You have your white belt and your yellow belt and your orange belt, depending on the tradition that you're in. And there's often 10 levels of belts as you're getting more skills and abilities and learn before you can, test and earn your black belt if you have enough skill and ability. But if you really get into martial arts, at least this in my tradition, this is what we were taught by our senseis, is that it's not until you get your black belt. It's like, okay, now we can begin. Now we can really teach you. And so to make the analogy, I think what Grant is saying is beauty weighs the black belt. Okay, and now we can really get into the business. And I would think, all of the things that I talked about in my talk, and using psychoimmunology for, the structural parasites and these various parasites as different levels, it's not like, oh, well, the hell with all of it until, we figure out beauty way. We're thinking that soon, but we don't know exactly. And those are things moving, if you will, up through the belts and getting you more and more prepared. Someone had asked me about a paradigm shift, to be able to make the paradigm shift, to be willing to do the healing, the work, and spread it around, to eventually have everyone have a black belt beauty way state. And then we can really get down to it.
I should point out that the researchers have to go through the list of belts. When we're done, we're hoping, oh, you just sign up for this little tick and you get a black belt in the mail.
Yeah.
There's a question here that I can quickly answer, which is, will there be institute brick and mortar healing wellness centers? So in the short term, definitely not. This is our financial situation as an institute would have to significantly change for that to happen. But when we do find a few minutes to sit down and kind of dream of what the future could look like, it would be great to have some physical centres. And probably the one area in particular where I'd like to have that is in helping people with suicide. And the reason for that is that as part of, Grant mentioned safety. Safety is probably the number one thing that we focus on. It's a really high priority for us. And so we don't work with anyone who's had suicidal history, or certainly not recent suicidal thoughts. And as a result of that, there's a lot of people that really need help and have tried lots of things and believe that our model could help them, that at the moment, from a safety perspective, we actually can't help them. And the only way we'd be willing to do that would be if they were in a physical facility, 24/7 care. They might get suicidal thoughts, but there's no way that they're going to be able to act on that. So that would require a brick and mortar. And if we get to that point where we've got the money to be able to create that so that there's more people who can help, then we're definitely on track.
The other thing that I would add is before that time, and totally agree with everything that Shayne said, but the possibility of a virtual clinic. I mean, since COVID, we really know how providing therapy is more and more done virtually and more accepted. And so having some sort of a virtual clinic, and my personal dream is a 365-day, 24/7 virtual clinic staffed by therapists in every time zone around the world that people can pop into our waiting room and make appointments and get help. But we'll see.
Well, that's probably a lot more achievable.
Well, I was hoping our brick and mortar would just have a sign, Beauty Way here, and then in.
And go.
And then next to it, maybe
pina colada.
Yeah, and pina coladas over that way. And then maybe something about your particular disease. Okay, Parkinson's here and diabetes here, and different little doorways.
So Kirsten, as our Director of Research, a question for you. So what's the path to join research for psychoimmunology within the Institute?
Masochism.
You like guinea pig food.
So I would say, knowing most people come through the training, I would say. But we have talked to people who are interested in the research part, and I wouldn't turn down anyone that would have that interest and show the abilities to do so. So training is one way, direct contact, and let's chat. And I mean, from there, it's figuring it out. There's no official setup for it. Let's put it that way.
We've had people call us up, and when we mention, oh yeah, we can't pay you, they lose interest real fast.
I think the other thing, and this building off where we started with Shayne at the very beginning, is we're very interested in collaborating with researchers in other fields, particularly with labs with microscopes and all sorts of things, and make this connection from our model into how is that seen through the model of, if you will, conventional medicine and biology and chemistry, and so to speak. So we're very interested in talking to those people. This is where I like to say we do weird things that work. And our model is so far out of the conventional paradigm that often people just write us off as, I'm not quite sure what but they often politely roll their eyes. You can kind of see this and going, oh my gosh, I don't know what they're smoking there. But
it's not that far out if you think about prenatal work and what matters.
And subcellular biology.
Subcellular biology.
Hardcore biology.
Yeah. So, but
we are hopeful.
we're hopeful and we're working on it.
Yeah, and we're looking for, so anybody who has, contacts, interest, money, wants to give us a grant to study something, we're, like Kirsten said, all ears, come and chat with us.
Okay,
Yeah,
one last. Oh, sorry. Okay, Grant.
Oh, Grant was going to say something.
Yeah, it's okay. Go.
No, I was going to move to the next question. So say that, whatever you're going to add.
That's
No?
okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so one last question, and then I'll ask each of you for any final words that you want to leave our audience with. So Gregory Marty, who is actually one of our students, is asking, what is the path to follow if we want to join you in achieving the goal of healing humanity?
I think there are two questions in there. What's the passion that you have? Because that's what we want you to do. So however that fits into our institute is a way to figure that out. That would be, being a student and doing the hard work for understanding and doing the work is a brilliant start. But next is, what's the passion, I think, from the individual.
I think that's a pretty good answer. I don't have much to add to that. Grant?
I'll add something. I structured the institute to have guinea pigs who could give me feedback and actually, apply corrections if we needed it. Hopefully we'll be rolling out Beauty Way in weeks, and so the people who've been coming through the process of becoming certified and stuff, they're the beta testers. True, you may not be in the excitement of Wes, or me dancing around holding my privates and screaming, ow, ow, ow. But yeah, it's a huge and important function. We need to actually have people who can observe themselves and follow instructions and test this stuff out.
I think what Grant is trying to say here is that even just joining the institute as a therapist certified is a really help for the institute.
Exactly.
So if that's the passion in itself, that is a help. If there's other passions that an individual can have that goes beyond that and wants to do other things, that's great too. So thank you.
Okay, so let's wrap up. Any final words that you want to leave the audience with?
I'll go while Grant's thinking. One of the things that I'm going to start to do. So when however many years ago, several years ago, I stepped back from teaching trauma therapists, from being part of the training, to devote what became a more and more full-time job in research, which was me following my sense of how I was being called and my passion and excitement at that time, which is still there. But having made some of these fundamental breakthroughs and seeing the work that is ahead of us, and knowing there needs to be this paradigm shifting in other people, that I'm committed to doing training again. But what the part I want to do is, Shayne in the training department, he mentioned is modularizing the whole training. So right now, to become a certified therapist, it's like, I don't know, 150 hours. I don't know, Shayne, I got that right now. It's a lot, and over a lot of time. And that's what we need to train therapists in all of our techniques. But really getting the models and learning how to heal simple trauma, which is generational, biographical, and associational trauma, which can help with a whole lot of things in people, and gives you the models and the structure of where we're coming through and when we're talking. That only takes about 15 hours. So I'm going to start doing a lot more of these foundational trainings. And so if you, and it's a great jumping off part for seeing, oh, am I possibly interested in doing the whole trauma therapy or the next module, if that is what your passion and your sense of purpose is. As Shayne mentioned in the beginning, I'm also interested in looking at if we can get helping professionals out there that are already working with people that go, oh, I want to move forward, I want to do something. And these are often coaches, you know, maybe therapists as well, but coaches who are working with healthy people who want to get even healthier and go and have transformational experiences. If we could get these tools at a very simple level into the hands of coaches so that more people are exposed and it's just the thing to do, and then they can refer for bigger problems that they can't handle to our trauma therapists, and then the really big problems to research so we can figure out problems we haven't come across. That's kind of the model I'm building in my head as the medical director. So getting the word out about that, be in touch with me. So that's the thing that I am committed to doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary.
I'd just like to offer my gratitude for this opportunity to reconnect with some of the folks in the Institute, and for the opportunity to take what has been a really wonderful stroll down memory lane. That was one of the most exciting periods of my life, that time as guinea pig number 2. So I'm just really grateful, and I encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. And that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I have a similar message to Wes. I'm incredibly grateful for the work that the 4 of you have done over many, many years. The breakthroughs that you've helped our organisation discover that are now on the verge of making possible to make significant changes to people's lives. Just feel so blessed that I get to be on a panel with such extraordinary people. So thank you all for everything that you've done.
Well, I just want to share that it is an exciting time in the Institute, because that we have, the model has expanded to what it is today, and that we actually have techniques to peel off layers and get to hopefully resolving different diseases and make them so that people can actually do them at a successful rate. It's that's my my goals in research here, and yeah, thanks.
I just want to thank everyone for attending and listening, and yeah, I'm really grateful. I was about to make a joke about having pina coladas on the beach while you guys work, but you know, yeah, it's been hard work, but fundamentally rewarding. And for the people who are listening, who are interested in what we're doing, it's fundamental. It's has a potential to change everything, and it's worth doing. And as I say every year, it's great that you've waited this long, because we're so much further down the developmental process that we're poor Wes, man, we were just like landmine detectors, just stomping the ground with our hands over our eyes to see what happened. And
trailblazers, not mine detectors, trailblazers.
Yeah, yeah, but it's yeah, I mean, we've got some significant hurdles left, like finishing Beauty Way and the peak states issue with prions and stuff, but they're solvable, and our models are really good. And it's really, we're actually writing papers now for peer review. That's a big step for us. We haven't bothered in the past, but now we're further down the pike. We have good models and we have good applications to demonstrate the accuracy of our models and stuff. So that's fun for us. I'm looking forward to having those in the world.
Can I say one more thing? I forgot something. Another request for you. So I'm also going to try to be out there talking about this a lot more. So, and I want to tell our stories from the Institute. So be thinking if you are a therapist or have a client and have a story that has changed your life, get in touch with me. I think I'm going to do a podcast. You know, podcast is just all the thing now. So I think we need one. So I want to do that. So be thinking about that. Get in touch with me. And any opportunities you have of people and groups that I can speak to about this. I think we're ready and we need to start spreading the word in that way. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. So we're officially done now. So about 15 minutes over time. Thank you all for being here. Hopefully you found this very informative, and hopefully, fingers crossed, won't be too far down the track that we'll actually have some exciting stuff for you to participate in. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for watching. For more information, please visit www.peakstates.com.